pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to Why Is That? So, I'd say I'm calmed down from the last subject that I've talked about when it came to answering certain questions, but now here's another question that I have to answer. This one, I actually like. No joke. Because this one happens to talk about a pretty big interest that I've taken up in, and I've possibly considered going to college for it, or even medical school, but that's not entirely what the question is about. It basically says, down here in the screenshot, why is that you take an interest in podiatry and try to study the human foot in many different possible ways? So, of course, many people might actually find this unsettling or even cumbersome or somewhat unusual, but I don't really find the study of the human body to be unusual. Anyone, of course, who studies in anatomy in any different possible way, including the studies of the brain, the study of the heart, the circulation system, the endocrine system, the nervous system, the digestive tract, and the, well, sexual organs. Of course, there's lots of people out there that do take an interest in studying the human body in all these different possible ways. There's so many different medical books that take place on the study of the human body, its function itself, and how DNA happens to build up our body in the same way as a blueprint would in terms of how you can build a certain building. But, of course, when it comes to the study of the human foot, it's a whole different story. The human foot is indubitably one of the most major types of body parts ever to be found in the human body. Of course, the sense organs like the eyes, nose, mouth, ears, and fingertips, they're one thing, but in terms of studying the feet, arches, toes, ankles, legs, and everything about that part, the lower half is one of a kind when it comes to the human body and in terms of its natural motion. What I can say for sure about it firsthand is that, aside from many people not wanting to know much about their own feet, it actually is of big importance, because there actually has been a new series called My Feet Are Killing Me, starring podiatrists and doctors like Ebony and Brad. Of course, if you're not familiar with that series, there's a lot to be known about what the human foot can possibly have in terms of deficiencies and health disorientations, and a lot of things. It just so happens that even if one minor mishap takes place in one foot or toe, it actually can affect the whole body in a lot of ways. It's much like with how your hand would work, simply put, because of course, there's actually millions of people out there who can't even live without their hands. And simply put, the main reason why that is because, after all, 10 fingers happen to do 10 thousands of different possible things that you probably couldn't do if you didn't have hands. Hands are definitely one of the most popular, well-known parts of the bodies, and definitely one of the most functional. But in terms of the human foot, they are indeed designed differently. They're not necessarily made to act like backup hands, although if you practiced hard enough, then well, you probably could pick up something with your toes. But of course, that's kind of besides the point here, because I take an interest in studying podiatry, the human foot in general, and I like to talk about it almost all the time, because it just so happens there's a lot of things that could potentially go wrong in your whole life if you were to not take care of your feet the proper way. Such podiatrists out there, like Dr. Ray McClanahan, who was famous for inventing the correct toe spacers, would probably give you a lot of information that's worth noting. Especially when it comes to getting to know about some of the most painful and probably the worst deformations of the human foot whenever possible, such as bunions, hammer toes, plantar fasciitis, sesamoiditis, and hundreds of other different possible deficits that the human foot can take. Of course, many people would complain today that their feet would hurt due to soreness or old age, or because of how they walk all day. But that's actually a really modest thing to think about. Because it's not only running and walking or any other things that the human foot can do to move you around all day that can cause pain and soreness, but it's also the development of some deformations and other sorts of health problems that take place in the feet themselves. Of course, aside from the fingertips, especially when it comes to getting a paper cut, or your teeth, or a few other parts of the body, your feet are definitely some of the most sensitive parts in the body themselves. Even more sensitive than everything else. The feet and toes, especially the soles, the undersides of them, can actually pick up a lot more information and process it to the brain, especially without any footwear on, than any other organ combined. The feet themselves can definitely track any sort of potential problem or hazard that you could end up stepping on before you'd even realize it. They can touch any surface and send the signals to the brain on whether or not it is okay or not to step on them. But the biggest thing about them, whenever possible, is that, especially if they're treated in the correct way, then of course, if you take a look at certain newborn babies, their feet are positioned in a much more different way than how we are if we were all grown up. 35, 55 years old or something like that. Our feet would look totally different. And that's only because throughout the many years of our life, we've taken into having the wrong kind of footwear on at all times. Depending on how often we wear them, it definitely can cause problems for you. Of course, the many vlogs that I have in terms of talking about podiatry in its many ways and how you can prevent or correct a lot of these different problems on you right now or even before they happen, the purpose of all that is simply because it is more important than you can possibly ever imagine. And of course, if the series My Feet Are Killing Me doesn't give you a message that if you don't take care of your feet the right way, there's a good chance that you could potentially run into a pretty hazardous, lethal, or even very expensive dilemma. Of course, that's why we have real footwear, proper socks and shoes, as well as some gear made to correct toe posture and shape. So this way you won't have to have any of these problems to begin with. And that right there is probably all you need to know about unofficial podiatry, because after all, there have been a lot of videos that I've made about it in general. Podiatry is something that I've really taken up for the last 2 years, and probably for the rest of my life. I will not go one single minute without thinking that something could be wrong with my foot function. Of course, here in today's time, because of the 2 years that I've spent with wearing the right kind of footwear, shoes, boots, sandals, and all that, as well as Injinji socks, I've really been able to prevent a lot of possible hazardous deformations and pain that could have come about by now, because after all, if you wear certain footwear for an extended period of time, then well, it could boost some of these problems so they can happen a lot earlier in your life. There have been some people that I've seen bunions come onto them before they're even 30 years old. And I don't really blame them. I probably blame the shoe companies that sell the wrong kind of footwear all over the place. In all honesties, when the time comes, a fundraising campaign should be put together so this way these real shoemakers out there, such as Altra, Ahinsa, Magical, Lems, Luna, Zero, and many others, can have all the money they ever need to upgrade or put out an endorsement to have their shoes sent out to retailers like Famous Footwear, Joann, Payless Shoe Source, and hundreds of other companies out there that sell shoes. But just like with what I got going on here on my channel, I've got long roads to go. And that long road is probably going to have to wait even longer than everything else that I have on my channel. But if you want to see more, go down to my channel here. Because there's going to be more WiseDat questions to come alongside the many others that I got here as well, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.